It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Let's transition now. I want to talk about 14 to 24-year-olds. Now, that's a big, broad group because you're kind of jumping into the upper end of middle school all the way through graduating college.
But probably into their first job,
A lot
maybe?
of life things. But here's the thing I do know. 14-year-olds, they're starting to realize how life works a little bit. I know when I was 14, I was already thinking about what happened when I turned 16, and I was trying to figure out how I could save as much money
get a car, right?
so I could turn that future $1,000 car I had and put $3,000 in it. Really good decision making at the time. I needed a show like this to show people what money can become. That's really the skill that you're trying to develop for the 14 to 24-year-olds is what is the opportunity for every dollar that you have?
And what I think is so interesting is you just said it perfectly. A 14-year-old can get the idea in their head of, oh, well, if I do this, I can have a car at 16. Or a 16-year-old can think, okay, how much do I want to go off to college with? Or a 24-year-old, they probably are thinking they need to recognize what the dollars they put away at 24 can become later in life. I think this is a huge, huge swath of time where getting the basics of finance down is so, so, so important.
Well, and you said this is likely the period of time you make your first investment.
Yep.
And to encourage that, I always like, what do you do when you're trying to start an engine of a car? You pour a little bit into the carburetor. You pour a little bit of fuel in there just to kind of prime the pump. So I think this is the perfect opportunity. If you're looking for teachable moments with your children or grandchildren, or even this is something, guys, if you're a youngster out there watching this, I sound so old saying it that way, but if you're a young person, you could easily approach your parents or grandparents and say, look, how about instituting a matching program? Because this is what I've done with my kids. I have a dollar for dollar matching program where for my oldest, we use it for her custodial Roth. But you could, if you didn't want to worry about the self-employment tax or filing the annual tax return to do that custodial Roth account, you could do this with just a normal custodial account. Or you could even do this if you're trying to save for college with a 529 plan. But all I know is try to create something that really encourages, greases the skids to start the habit of becoming addicted to saving and investing money.
Another thing that I think is so important that happens at this stage, and I feel like we as an education system fail this a little bit, because I know when I was coming through primary school, I never learned about like budgeting and normal finance. But I think if we can help our 14 to 24-year-olds understand, if X comes in, you need some number less than X going out. Very simple budgeting, understanding the idea of scarcity, the idea of deferred gratification. That's a skill set that is so much more valuable that while the kids are in your house and you have some control, you want them to learn that. Because you said when you got on campus at the University of Georgia, there were folks lined up willing to give you a T-shirt or a bag of chips to go sign up for a credit card. And a credit card, frankly, is the anti-budgeting mechanism. You don't need to worry about what's coming in or coming out because that bad boy just keeps on swiping.
Well, I think this is the stage. Not only is it your first investments, but you kind of alluded to this, Bo. If you're going to have a budget, that is a great skeleton system of how much money is coming in, how much is going out. And we all know the older you get, the more complicated life gets. I mean, I have shared this story, and it's probably been a while since I've expressed what go-kart math is. When I was younger, I wanted a go-kart. I knew my dad made like $35,000 a year. I knew that the go-kart was $500 a year, at the time. So I was like, my father can afford so many go-karts. Why in the world do I not have a go-kart?
And I just want one. I just want one go-kart.
So that is what I call young person go-kart math. I've kind of coined it because I wanted a go-kart. What I've learned as I've gotten older, there's a lot of things pulling at your back pocket as an adult. So you might as well go ahead and start passing on those lessons to young people, especially as they get that first job. They start working because they're going to quickly learn that there's this thing called Uncle Sam who codes himself under the word FICA. So you can put your Social Security and Medicare. And this is also the part where and maybe this is the accountant in me. I love the thought of budgeting and the fact that if you start with budgeting at a young age, you'll learn that wealth creation consists of either you have to make more money or you have to spend less. And the power of a good reconciliation of what you're trying to do is so powerful. And that's why this could lead to the first bank account, because it's not only investing you're trying to encourage, it's also good management of your cash or investments. all this stuff is kind of working together.
Now, I get myself in trouble. Again, I have young daughters, and oftentimes when my wife and I will go out on a date or something, we'll have babysitters come in.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed by the babysitters. So I'm like, hey, I'd like to pay you. How are you doing? Like, oh, well, can you just give me cash? I'm like, why don't I just write you a check? Oh, I don't have a checking account. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And I try to like bite my tongue because I don't want to like step on their parents' toes, but I'm thinking, man, I remember the first time I got to go with my parents and go open up that first savings account. Like, it was a big deal. And that was like in high school. That was in these formative years. And I can't imagine like getting all the way through high school and not having that experience. It would probably feel overwhelming and you feel lost. So I'm glad that my parents decided to curate that experience for me.
Serious question here. How many of them is Venmo?
So a lot of them.
I would figure
Yep.
because here's the thing: we live in downtown Franklin, which is just south of Nashville, Tennessee. So, being that we're connected to Nashville, there's a lot of people trying to get famous, have great musical skills. So we have people in downtown Franklin all the time playing the violin, playing guitars, doing things. I've found it quite interesting now outside of their guitar that they've got open. Instead of you throwing a few bucks in, they'll typically have a scan for your Venmo.
Oh, where you
for
can
their
just do the
Venmo, where
thing?
you can take your phone and Venmo them a tip.
Genius.
It's really a brilliant, talking about greasing the skids of making it easy to tip. You just take your phone over
love
there,
it.
QR code it, and you're set. But this is the part I briefly touched on this. I want to go a little deeper on how you can actually make this practical. You're probably trying to figure out, do I do a normal custodial account or do I do a custodial Roth account, assuming you're under 18 years of age? And here's the part I need you to ask yourself. Do you want to? I love the value of tax-free growth because, Bo, we're going to share some numbers that are mind-blowing on what the opportunity for every dollar to become if you will put it and invest it for the future. What I find interesting, though, is that there are a few hoops you have to jump to if you want to get that tax-free growth. First of all, to open up any type of IRA, you have to have earned income. It means you have to have wages, self-employment income. So that means you're either working someplace or you're doing a side gig that you can file as self-employment, like babysitting, cutting grass.
No problem, Brian. I got it covered. My daughter, I have her do some chores around the house, and I gave her $40. She got earned income.
So she's
go.
got earned income, but now, and if you're matching it dollar for dollar, she could say that's $80 worth of income. The problem is you still got to file a tax return because you have to tell our favorite taxing uncle, Uncle Sam, you have to file a tax return with the IRS reporting that income. You also are going to have to pay, and you probably will not have to pay income taxes because it's just going to be such a low number.
amount.
It'll be covered. It'll be okay. But you will have to pay, no matter how low the number is, you have to pay self-employment tax, which is 15.3% because you pay both the employer as well as the individual. Now, if they're getting a W-2, because I worked fast food all through high school, so that's only 7.65%, and I got a W-2. But I just want to make sure people are aware the difference between a normal custodial account doesn't have all that. It's just income taxes. You just have to set up the beneficiary. But then the custodial Roth is going to require, because it's an IRA structure, earned income and those other compliance requirements.
But maybe you're someone who did not have access or exposure to that. One of the things that I remember so fondly, and I think I had an unfair advantage because I was studying financial planning. I went to University of Georgia and I was studying financial planning. And I remember I took my very first investments course and I learned about like stocks and bonds and all that stuff. And I was like, wait, I can do this. I mean, I've got a bank account. I've got a checking account. Why don't I go open an investment account? And I think a lot of folks in this 14 to 24, this is probably the stage where they might open their very first investment account ever. Even if it's not like something that mom and dad helped them do, like a custodial Roth, this is the first time they're seeing a 401k for the first time, or they heard one of their dad's friends say, go fund a Roth IRA. This might be the stage where they do that for the very first time.
Well, first, and this is easy, I want to give you some priorities and some things to think about. If you do have wage income, this gets really easy. Do the Roth IRA. That's the first place you ought to start. And then if you're looking at when, where, and how am I going to make that happen? Because you guys are like, that's great in theory, but what's actually the steps? There's so many new technologies created opportunity. Because think about the fact that you can use Fidelity Investments has a bunch of zero investment options,
Completely
meaning you
free.
have no minimums on opening the account, no commissions, zero minimums on the investment choices, and zero costs on the internal expenses of these funds. They're index funds, so they're super cheap. There's also Acorn, there's Robinhood.
Tons of apps.
There's lots of apps. There's lots of opportunities to open that first investment account. And then you're asking yourself, what do I invest in? And this is that question that I had somebody ask me at dinner one night, and because the older sibling was trying to suggest Bitcoin. And I have I'm not going to give an opinion here on Bitcoin, but I do think it's interesting because you had made the example of individual stocks. I think it's much easier if you think about the fact that you want to invest and give yourself the most highest likelihood of success, and that's index investing.
Absolutely.
It is so much easier to buy a basket of holdings, because that's what an index is. Instead of you going out there and buying 500 individual holdings for the S&P 500 or 1,000 holdings if it was like a total market index, you could do that by making one purchase into an index target retirement fund. It even offers you some asset allocation there as you get older. So it's a set it, forget it. You only have to come up with two things. How much money can I save? When do I need the money? The investment will do the rest of it.
I think a sign of success here is if the young person that you're talking to or interacting with, or maybe if you are the young person, the thing that we don't want you to get addicted to is the investing, is like the picking the things. It's the putting the money to work. If you can get addicted to putting your dollars to work, your savings rate is going to be exponentially more important than whatever your rate of return is. So you should focus on how much can I put away, not how do I divvy up what I'm investing.
So cast a wide net. That's the biggest thing. You know, I want you to be a fisher of dollars. I've given the analogy a few times recently is that there's a difference between fishing to catch like your life depends upon it, you know, because your retirement that's spreading a wide net. If you knew you had to fish for a living, you're going to put a net in the water. And that's what index investing is, and that's what the index target retirement funds will do. If you were fishing for a living with just a spear gun, you might get lucky if you hit the big one, if you're Ahab and get the great white whale. But the problem is most people don't do that. So
you might go hungry.
Yeah, you might go hungry. So you hear all your friends talk about how much they're making in Bitcoin, how much they're making in Tesla. Those whales have been caught already. And I'm worried that if you are thinking that's how you're going to get to your wealth right now, you might come up empty. So go ahead and, like I said, fish like your life depends upon it. Throw a net in the water versus just throwing out there one spear at a time, because it's just going to be a lot harder and a lot bigger risk that you will not reach success.
The other thing I think that's so important that you have to master at this phase is you really have to understand debt. Now,
for sure.
The beautiful part about being young is you've not had a lot of time to get yourself into a debt problem, with the exception of student loans. That's the one debt that this age range tends to seem a lot. But if you can get yourself or your young person that you're interacting with to understand debt by the time they get to 23, 24, you are going to set them up for so much success, because it's the folks who get out of school and start their first job and start thinking, oh, well, if I can just afford the monthly payment, that means I can afford it. That's not having a healthy understanding of debt. That's not recognizing how harmful and disastrous it can be to your long-term financial well-being.
Well, I think that here's the mistake the majority of young folks make, is that they see debt as this mirage or false bridge to get them to the point that they can afford stuff. They think hey, I deserve this, I'm owed this, I've earned it, I'm going to go get the car, and it's okay, I'm going to just use debt. I can't really afford to pay for this out of my pocket, so I'll use debt, and yeah, I'm not getting to save yet, but that's okay. In a few years, as I'm making even more money,
I've got plenty of time.
I got plenty of time. I'll go make up what I've already done here, and then. But the thing is, you don't get the time back. You also are backwards, meaning because you've got your car payments are here and they stay here. You never started the investing. You were completely upside down in starting the habit that becomes financial mutant status. And this is my guidance on debt. You need to treat debt like it's a chainsaw. And what I mean by that is that chainsaws can be very effective, but man, are they scary. There's a reason every haunted house has chainsaws with the chains taken off of them, because they scare the heck out of you every time they rev them up. You need to treat debt the exact same way, because the problem is it's a very effective tool, but if you're using it and you're not scared of it, you're using it completely wrong. And this is what I'm telling you, you're going to wake up 30 years old and you're going to remember this show and you're going to be like, crud, why did I get myself in so much credit card debt? Because that's the problem I saw in college, especially my junior and senior years. A lot of my peers were getting credit card debt, and yes, their credit limit was only $1,500, $2,000. But man, that was when you were paying interest over 20%. $1,500 to $2,000 can feel like a lot of repression on you. So stay away from it and try to make sure that you have more money going into investing than you do making debt payments, and that's going to go a long way to helping you create success.
And this is why it's so powerful, because you said something a second ago, Brian. The young folks in the States think, oh, I've got plenty of time, I've got plenty of time, I've got plenty of time. And while that's true, what you need to recognize is that plenty of time that you have is the thing that makes your dollar so powerful. Again, if we want to think about, for a 20-year-old, we know that $1 turns into $88 by the time they turn 65. Well, for that 14-year-old, $1 turns into $161.
Wow.
But if you just wait 10 years, if you go all the way out till age 24, it drops to 50. Now, $1 turning into 50 is still amazing. You should still be so excited about that. But you can see that every year that you wait, every year further you get closer to retirement, the less powerful those dollars are. So the sooner you can figure it out, the earlier you can get that train rolling, the more momentum it's going to get, the stronger your army of dollar bills are going to be.
Well, I think if you type in financial concepts and other things, they always use trees as the imagery. I like to think that if you can think about investing, you're planting seeds of that great big live oak and giving yourself plenty of time for it to grow. Whereas debt, there's a reason we talk about chainsaw as the tool. You're cutting down. It's the shovel you're digging your hole with. Think about those things and those concepts, guys. And this is so powerful to know that every dollar has the potential to be $160.
Unbelievable.
And even, by the way, a 24-year-old that every dollar is $50, a
huge.
50 times multiple is still tremendously valuable. So if you're watching this as a 24-year-old, you still have the world as your oyster. You have it by the tail. You just have to make sure you have a healthy relationship with debt and let your army of dollars start building as young and as early as possible.
So again, if you want to know just how powerful your dollars can be, we have a deliverable out on our website, moneyguy.com/resources. And we actually show you what every dollar from age 14 to 24 can turn into, but we take it a step further. We say, okay, if you want to be a millionaire, or maybe you want your 14-year-old to be a millionaire, how much would they have to save every month starting from now all the way until they get to retirement at age 65? For a 14-year-old, it's about $52. But before you say, oh, $1 million is not going to be worth what it is, if you want them to be a multi-millionaire, have $2 million by the time they retire, we've even put those numbers on the deliverable as well.
So go grab that resource. Completely free. So moneyguy.com/resources. What do you have to lose on that?
Absolutely.